Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 12. Proverbs chapter 12. Our text will be verse 10. I will read half the chapter down to verse 15. Whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof is brutish. A good man obtaineth favor of the Lord, but a man of wicked devices will he condemn. A man shall not be established by wickedness, but the root of the righteous shall not be moved. A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. The thoughts of the righteous are right, but the counsels of the wicked are deceit. The words of the wicked are to lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright shall deliver them. The wicked are overthrown and are not, but the house of the righteous shall stand. A man shall be commended according to his wisdom, but he that is of a perverse heart shall be despised. He that is despised and hath a servant is better than he that honoureth himself and lacketh bread. A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. He that tilleth his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he that followeth vain persons is void of understanding. The wicked desireth the net of evil men, but the root of the righteous yieldeth fruit. The wicked is snared by the transgression of his lips, but the just shall come out of trouble. A man shall be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, but the recompense of a man's hands shall be rendered unto him. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. Again, our text is verse 10. A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Last time we saw the beginning of the Proverbs proper, in chapter 10, verse 1. And we were encouraged to be wise and thus make our father and our mother glad. We turn now to a new field of service, not to parents or to any other men, but to beasts, that is, to animals, and by extension to all of the lower creation. Unlike the wicked man, the wise man, the righteous man, recognizes that even beasts deserve some honor, and he freely gives it to them as a means to honor the creator of both men and beasts. Our text, verse 10, lays out the contrast of true mercy and false mercy. So first, true mercy. It's shown in three things. First, the person, a righteous man, a man that is committed to upright living, whose life is in conformity to the law of God. This is inseparable from the righteousness that comes by faith in Jesus Christ, without which a man can never be said to be truly righteous in God's sight, for how else would his sins be forgiven? But also a righteousness that is infused to him by the Holy Spirit, by which he lives a righteous life. These two things are inseparable, to be justified and to be sanctified. The virtues that we'll speak of here are virtues that wicked men can have to some extent. But those virtues are not pleasing to God if they do not proceed from a heart of faith and are exercised for God's glory. God is not pleased even with the outward virtues of wicked men. He requires that we would be righteous men, first of all, before we do righteous deeds. So this person is righteous. True mercy is shown in his action. So the person, and then second, his action. It says, he regardeth the life of his beasts. When it says he regardeth, that's literally that he knoweth. He knows the true need of his beast and does not neglect it. He makes provision in his mind and in his plans, and he takes diligent care. He is mindful to show mercy. He regards. So that's the action. Third, the object of that action. Person, the action. Third, the object. It is life. He regards the life of his beast. Now, sometimes this word can be translated soul. For though under the sun only man has a rational soul, all animals have what we can call an animal soul. In Latin, an anima, or the breath of life, by which they are alive, not dead. They sense and know some things by this animal soul, and though animals are not men, they are like men in surprising ways. Even when we consider plants, we could say that they have a sort of vegetable soul in which they live, in which they grow and respond to their environment. And at the loss of that soul, they also die. We know the difference between a living plant and a dead plant. Once they die, they're composted or they're burned, as we hope in today's outing to do with a tree in the backyard here. In all these ways, all living creatures bear some likeness to man, and more likeness than, say, the rocks or the clouds or other things that are not living. We could say that these creatures were made in our image. And because we were made in God's image, they are then the image of an image. And in that respect, they are God's image too, at least in some way. Therefore, they are worthy of honor and care, each creature in its own place. And the righteous man knows that place, and he freely shows that honor and care. He regards life. This is the object of his regard. But then it's more specific. It's the life of his beast. And this shows a special relation of the beast, not just as an animal, but as my animal. This shows that it's lawful to possess animals as our own, to have animals as property. It's also lawful and our duty to take dominion over all the creation, even after sin. But it also shows that that dominion calls for a responsible and even a loving rule. This furthermore approves of a special relation with certain animals, not just for work, but even for comfort and delight, what we call pets or animal companions. Some people think this is just a modern thing, but it's not true. Do you remember in 2 Samuel 12 when Nathan the prophet comes to David? He tells a story of a man with a little ewe lamb. But the poor man had nothing save one little ewe lamb, which he had brought and nourished up, and it grew up together with him and with his children. It did eat of his own meat, and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. This is tacitly approved as a good thing. He's not replacing his children, of course, but it's as a daughter. There's a sweet relation of love with this little ewe lamb. We learn that a traveler came and killed this lamb in order to feed, or a rich man killed the ewe lamb in order to feed this traveler. And David's response was anger. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, as the Lord liveth, the man that hath done this thing shall surely die. Now David was in excess because his own conscience was condemned against himself. But nonetheless, the Bible there approves of a special relation with certain animals. In English, we say that the dog is man's best friend. And the Bible does not oppose that. So, the righteous man regardeth the life of his beast. That's true mercy. The second part of our text contrasts it with false mercy. False mercy. And here we'll see three things also: the person, his affection, and its description. So first, the person. In contrast to the righteous man, we now meet the wicked man, the tender mercies of the wicked. The wicked are the opposite of the righteous. They do not live according to God's law, whether only in their heart, their life may outwardly conform to that law, or also in the outward lack of conformity, in which their life is just obviously sinful. Either way, they are not living right, and therefore they have no claim to be a true believer. They're wicked. The second thing we hear about is their affection, and this proves their wickedness. It's under this term tender mercies. Now, literally in Hebrew, this is bowels, your guts here in your abdomen. This is a common biblical image, Old Testament and New Testament. It describes the stirring of compassion by an effect it often has in your body. When you're sad for another, often you feel it right here. Your bowels are stirred up. And sometimes when it's very strong, it can have an effect that your bowels loosen. This is a common phrase, again, for mercy, for compassion. But here it is ironic, which means it's not really true, but it's told in a way to show off the falsehood of it. They're not true mercies that the wicked has. They're alleged mercies. He says, he thinks he's merciful, but it's really just an act. He is a hypocrite. This affection, tender mercies, thus is third described. The description of this affection shows what it's really like. The tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Cruel, unkind, unloving, malicious, harmful. They think they're showing mercy, and they show themselves most unmerciful in their very mercies. I'll give 3 examples to illustrate how this works. This happens all the time. First, regarding animals, we can describe a common phenomenon of leftist environmentalism. These are liberal people who think that they're the saviors of the planet. And they present themselves as very loving toward the earthly creatures. They're very concerned about the extinction of this or that animal, very concerned about animal habitats, very concerned about the encroachment of men upon the animals. But under the guise of loving the earthly creatures, they hate man, who is the greatest of all earthly creatures. For example, their solution to the troubles animals face in this world is that men should stop having children. We should depopulate the earth of men. That is a terrible cruelty. Save the whales by preventing children. The tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. A second example regards what is commonly called abortion, which is a medical term that's used to hide the fact that people murder their own children cruelly in the womb. They allege mercy to the mother for this. Oh, it would be such a hardship for this mother to have this baby at this time. And so we ought to show mercy to the mother by terminating the pregnancy, they say. But slaughter of the mother's child is no mercy. Certainly not to the child, but neither to the mother either. It's not mercy to women, especially when you consider the fact that half the children killed in the womb are future women, little girls. The tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. But I add to this a testimony from the ministry. There are many ministers who will come to their people with deep concern. And they'll say, brother, we're troubled for you. Our bowels are stirred up for you. And yet, the expression of that tender mercy is manipulation, slander, and the casting out of good men from their churches. This is not mercy. It's persecution. The tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Let's sum up what we've seen in this contrast between true mercy and false mercy. One thing that I'll focus on is that the righteous man takes special care for animals. He shows mercy to the beasts. I've proven this already, but I want to confirm it by the example of the patriarchs. Do you remember Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, even Job? How they were husbandmen. They cared for flocks and herds, and they did so very faithfully. You remember recently reading about Jacob and his particular care for Laban's herds and how God rewarded him by giving him his own from Laban's. Think of Solomon. He did it to excess, but he cared for all sorts of animals, including the horses that were in part his downfall. But these things are approved by the examples of godly men, but most of all of the example of God. You can read in Psalm 104 of how he cares for all the beasts. It goes on in detail, praising him. Matthew 6, Christ reminds us that God cares for the birds of the heavens. He feeds them. He cares for the lilies, these creatures with only a vegetable soul. He takes care that they would be beautiful and well arrayed. So why do you worry about food and clothing? That's his practical conclusion. So think of this. If God's our greatest example, shouldn't we be like him in caring for the beasts? If by analogy, God cares for us poor men, we are much lower compared to him than the beasts are compared to us. We're much closer to the beasts than to God. Then why would we not care for those under us, especially as we are by God explicitly given dominion over them? We're told in Genesis 1 and 2 to have dominion. And that dominion is not removed by sin. Rather, in Psalm 8, well after sin has come into the world, God is still celebrated for giving men dominion over all the cattle and beasts of the field. So I hope this proves that the righteous man takes special care for animals. And as we do, I will conclude then with application. 2 applications this morning. The first is for examination. You can know yourself by how you care for other creatures. They are somewhat of the image of God. And so you can know somewhat of your relation to God by how you care for them. So boys, I want you to think. Girls, I want you to think. Do you take care of animals? Do you love the little creatures? Are you truly merciful to beasts? I warn you here, there's a common phenomenon. We can talk the world over, and it's a mark of uncivilized nations that they are cruel to animals, that they practice all sorts of disgusting habits when it comes to their care or lack of care for animals. In some places, for example, boiling fish alive and watching them squirm on the plate while they eat them. It's disgusting, isn't it? Taking animals that should not be eaten and eating them. Or sometimes it's a mark of false religion to be cruel to animals as well. The Muslims, for example, have a form of slaughter that they call halal, and it is cruel to animals. You can know yourself by how you treat the creatures, but this is not just a matter of civilizations, but of individuals. Even in America, there is a phenomenon of little boys who love to torture creatures. That they will take a magnifying glass and burn ants to death. That they will take a BB gun and go shoot little birds that don't need to be shot. That there will be a delight in causing pain and death. A little boy who is like this is in great trouble. He's showing an ungodly heart. And little boys, if you have been like this to the animals, you need to see this is a warning that God is giving you, that your heart is not right. Your tender mercies are cruel, and thus you are a wicked man. But I want you also to examine yourself carefully and beware the false mercies of the wicked. To think because you're very merciful to animals that therefore you're a Christian. That doesn't work that way. There are many people who show great outward mercy to the beasts, but who show no mercy to men and show no love to God. I gave you a few illustrations already to warn you, but I want to bring up as well the phenomenon of dogs and cats today. Many people treat these creatures like their children, not in the good sense of that man with the ewe lamb in 2 Samuel 12, but in a way that replaces children, even literally. They choose to have dogs and cats rather than children, and they pamper their little dogs, so they treat them like men, and they treat men like dogs. This is disgusting and evil. And insofar as you do have pets, you need to resolve not to break down the barrier between animals and men. Don't show them a mercy that only men deserve. So thus examine your hearts. Know yourself by how you treat the other creatures. The second application then is exhortation to take a godly dominion. We seek to practice this in school. It's one reason I chose this text. Our plan now is to care for the ones we have, the fish and the rabbits. And you boys are doing well. I want you to resolve to be very faithful in your care for these creatures as a part of your honoring of God who created them and you. And I want you to see it as well as an important training for the future. I do hope that proving yourselves with these little creatures will be able to get some bigger ones, chickens, dogs, one day. And maybe as the Lord gives room, larger animals like sheep and cows. But you should also think of how these things train you to rule men. You need to be husbandmen of animals before you can be husbands of wives. You need to be shepherds of fish and rabbits and chickens and dogs before you become a shepherd of a flock of children in a family, or if the Lord calls you to ministry, of a flock of Christians in the church. Through your care for the little creatures, you learn care for the bigger creatures. And this is a fulfillment of Christ's statement in Luke 16, verse 10, which should always be on your mind, especially in school as you are being trained in little things. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. So may the Lord teach you to show true mercy to the beasts, and thus learn to show mercy to men and honor to God. Let's stand and pray.